most of the people that join or watch these calls or just follow me typically own a rental or two or several. And a lot of them even have maybe done some flips, but really at today's rates, the deals just don't pencil like they used to. The Burr strategy just hasn't been a viable strategy, at least in Boise, for almost a decade, and at least really with any kind of scale. So flips are hard to find. Rentals, you need to put 30 to 40% down just to break even. And even apartment syndications right now are really struggling. So today I'm going to show you the 3 ways that we create value in our system that almost nobody knows about. Fewer have the knowledge or experience to perform. And it's the reason why our clients are able to get returns and profits that seem almost unbelievable. Then I'm going to show you how that works on a live deal that is active today, that we sent out to our deal list investors and realtor partners today. So the first area that we create value is we find the deals that the land is as close to free as possible. So we do this by finding single homes that sit on large lots, large enough to subdivide into one or more properties. And in the ideal deal, you're not paying any extra for that larger lot. So you can resell the existing home once it's split or subdivided, and then retain the land for the cost of splitting that land. Now, typically, if you are getting land for free, the numbers are going to pencil well on anything else that you do with that land. So if you're talking about buying raw land, as we do in some of these deals, obviously you're not going to get the land for free, but we are trying to reduce the cost per unit to the lowest level possible. And that's done by maximizing density, as well as designing and building the best possible home. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. So the second area that we create value is we entitle and develop the property, increasing the value. So as long as it really costs less to acquire, entitle, and develop than what the end lots or lot is worth after the sales costs, ultimately you've created value. So just like in a flip, this is using a method of forced appreciation. So I'm going to show you the third way that we create outsized returns. But first, I'm just going to do a little introduction here. If you haven't met me yet, my name is Zach Matson. I'm a developer and builder here in Boise, Idaho, and I've been investing in real estate since 2013. So I started educating myself years prior to actually investing in real estate. I read dozens of books and attended hundreds of hours of in-person training and seminars. Then I started house hacking duplexes, living in one side, renting out the other. Did that a couple times, transitioned to flipping full time in 2016, and then transitioned into infill development in 2019 and 2020. So I realized at the beginning of last year that there was way more opportunity on the market than I could possibly do myself, and more opportunity than what our current market could take advantage of. So I created this system, our infill deal list system. And so what this system brings to the table is really a superpower that most investors or even developers and builders don't have. Ultimately, I can look at raw land or an overlooked lot and quickly underwrite it using my knowledge of zoning, highest and best use, and the actual build costs. And that's the whole engine behind the system, finding the deals that are hiding in plain sight. Most developers don't build and most builders don't develop. So our vertically integrated structure automatically has an uncommon approach in the marketplace. And it's why a lot of these deals work and most people overlook them. So we've analyzed thousands of properties and have personally gone through the entire process from buying the property to entitlements to horizontal development to building and selling the homes and even owning rentals. And then every Friday, we take what we're seeing in the market and break down one of the most interesting opportunities we found that week. Typically, we find a new deal every single week. We don't always have a new deal every week, but most of the time we do. So really, whether you're an experienced investor, a realtor, or you're just trying to figure out how the whole infill development thing works, you're in the right place. So without further ado, we're going to take a live look at today's deal and how we create what looks like sometimes an almost unbelievable return. Okay, so today's deal was actually brought to me off market by another realtor that's been following me for a few years. And so this is ultimately, she's planning on bringing it to the market eventually. It's probably in the next week or two, but right now we kind of have an exclusive look at it for our clients. And she presented it, I think, to another flipper developer as well. But right now we have a short time period where we can get our clients on board with this if they want to take advantage of it. So it's on Cloverdale Road in Boise. It's south. That's in South Boise. So it's kind of right in the path of where, well, it's already been developed back there, but then there's also more development going further south. But it's still close to town, close to the freeway. And ultimately, the play here is building 9 cottages on the existing property that's almost an acre. So there's an existing house on it. It's 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, 1,664 square feet. Uh, I haven't seen the pictures or been inside this property yet, but by the just from what the realtor told me, it sounds like it maybe needs new flooring, probably needs some paint too. But other than that, it sounds like there's some new updates to it. Now, I always take that with a grain of salt. So, ultimately we'll further analyze it, but I do have a budget in it to fix it up. And then once we are able to look at it and get it under contract, then that can determine ultimately the renovation that would be required. But we do have that in the budget. So just based on the current comparables, assuming the house isn't in terrible condition, it's worth right about where they're selling it at 525. And then the entitlement cost, this is the cost per unit to entitle, the cost to develop per unit. So what I'm talking about here previously on getting the land for free. So this property, so we can buy this house or this house on almost an acre right at about where the value of the property is. Now, this is pretty close to this. Now, maybe the house is only worth 500 based on, what we have to put into it. But even then, you're still getting, like, even if I put 25,000 here, oops, sorry. So even if I put 500,000 here, the cost basis for acquiring the land or the extra land is only 3,000 per lot. So it's pretty low acquisition on the land, even if the house isn't worth quite as much as 525. Now, obviously, that makes your numbers change a lot, and none of this is set in stone ultimately until we get through due diligence, but it gives us a really good starting point. Then our cost to entitle and then develop. Now, I think these costs are probably a little bit high compared to once we get the civil engineering and figure out what actually has to be done in here. And then same thing on this resale cost. Now, this works a little bit differently on cottages because you do the development and building, or you can do the development and building at the same time. Typically, you're just going to go from entitlements straight through horizontal and vertical pretty much at the same time instead of putting in all the infrastructure and then selling the lots off. So this price here is just based on selling it as maybe you do go through the development and then just sell it as a finished product that's ready to build on. But ideally, this is really just a kind of a plan B option. And then ultimately here, you're not really making money, you're breaking even, which is okay on this property. And this is probably really conservative anyway. This is probably closer to 100,000. And then all of a sudden you're making 15,000 per lot. And then you'd multiply that by 9. So you end up still making money on it. But again, we go in really conservatively. And as long as you're not at risk of losing a ton of money here, that's pretty good. So then we go into the construction costs, and this is where I want to talk about the third level of where we create value. So a typical builder, so if you hired a builder to build your house, whether it's a spec home or let's say it's a custom built home. So a lot of times, as if you're not a builder yourself, you haven't built multiple homes, there's about 200 different decision points that you have to make during that build process. And typically, if you haven't built multiple homes before, you're making those decisions on the fly and you're delaying the process as you go. Maybe you make a decision at the front end, but then you change your mind. And so ultimately, custom builders and builders that are building for a fee where you hire them to build a house at a time, number one, they don't have the scale there, so they're basically have to they have a higher profit or a higher markup that they have to do just to account for the lack of scale. But number two is they're having to price in the fact that there's going to be multiple decision points made. There's going to be delays because working with regular buyers or regular people that are hiring them to build their house is just a different ball game than when you're building spec houses at scale. And even this is a small scale where you're building 9. You know, it's obviously even different if you're building 40 or 50 homes, but 9 is still a larger scale than 1, and so we can get our build costs lower. And ultimately, that comes down to number one, we have 99% of decisions made before we ever break ground. So then it's just a really smooth process. As soon as we break ground, we're able to fly through the construction process because everybody has all the details of the build. They have all the design elements. They know exactly where everything is going. You know, you reconfirm that with walkthroughs, but you have all the design elements before you ever even put a shovel in the ground. And so you're eliminating, you know, a lot of times weeks or sometimes even months of delays during the build because you're not making hesitation decisions along the way. And ultimately, that also saves costs on the interest costs that you're paying to build those houses too. So we actually build in a pretty good interest reserve here into the costs, and our goal is to actually come in well under this, or at least, you know, 10 to 30% below this, but we factor this in just to make sure that we're not over promising anything. So then when we look at the total, so this cost right here for this to build this house, this is the total land acquisition cost, the total cost to get it entitled, developed, and built. This is prior to interest payments. So ultimately, once you pay interest on it, you're at about $325 per house. These houses, we feel, especially with the layout that we did, and I'll show you that in a minute, we feel like these would sell at $399 all day long. These would be 3-bedroom, 2-bath houses. The square footage, the floor square footage, which is how the city calculates the square footage, would be 1,000 square feet. The actual exterior square footage, when you go to list them on the MLS, is measured differently, and that ends up being around 1,100 to 1,150 square feet. And so ultimately, you can get a good 3-bedroom, 2-bath floor plan. We have actually a couple of these projects getting entitled right now, and we have some good 3-bedroom floor plans in this footprint. And so this 399 price is a great price point under sub 400 that you just don't see much of these at all in Boise, and for sure not in new construction. The new construction average price in Boise is probably like 650,000. I haven't looked at it here recently, but it's up over 600,000. Then we have our sales costs, then your profit per unit. So this profit per unit is times 9. So then we do have, based on what the agent told us, we put a renovation budget in here for flooring and paint, and then probably some other, you know, touch-up stuff as well. It's not a hefty budget for a full remodel. You know, again, based on what the agent told us, it doesn't sound like it needs a complete gut job. Just really probably some minor updates. So kind of putting some lipstick on it. And then based on the comps, we feel like it would sell a little bit higher than what we'd be buying it for. You do, when it's all said and done, there's still a loss on the existing house, and you can resell this house once it's platted. We put in 18 in these cost assumptions here. We put in that it would be resold after about 18 months. That's to get it basically remodeled and then replatted. And you could rent it out. It sounds like it's livable in the current conditions. You could have somebody in there, you know, right off the bat, and then remodel it maybe at the very end, or the other way around. But anyway, so this loss is basically based on the sales cost. So this is assuming, you know, this sales price and the value is not going up more than that in the next year and a half. We don't make assumptions that prices are going to be higher. And that's another, you know, thing to note here too. So this is if this were on the market today, but 2 years from today, this might be 425 or it might be 450. That would be, you know, really great. But, and at the same token, it could be 375. We're not in a downward trajectory market right now. So that would be rare, but there is always that risk. And that's also why we put a profit guarantee on all of our deals. which basically we guarantee the profit once we get through due diligence up to an extent. So it's up to a maximum of $200,000, but I'll talk about that here in a second as well. So on the existing house, you assume a little bit of a loss, so that kind of gets eaten into, part of the profit of one of those houses. Um, and then, and that's factoring in, all your holding costs as well, minus the rents that you receive. Um, and then we look at if you wanted to keep all of the new units and just refinance them. We do have some investors that look at doing this. In today's interest rate environment, these typically don't pencil very well, just because, it's hard to make something pencil at 7% interest rate. But if you wanted to do that, that's a possibility. And in 2 years from now, if the interest rate is 5%, maybe that pencils really well to keep them all as rentals. But in this model, we assume we're going to sell them. And then we just compare this with what our lenders look at it, which is loan to value and loan to cost. These numbers aren't solid, but we know that most lenders are going to look at least this. Sometimes they'll do plus or minus this a little bit. So as long as these numbers are really close, ideally they're more than this, but as long as they're really close, then we know the cash out of pocket isn't going to vary much from what we present. And we, on my end, we actually have levers that we can pull to change these numbers, because these numbers here are including our build fee. So we can withhold some of that build fee until the end to make sure that they line up with these loan to value and loan to cost numbers to make sure that it's not costing you more out of pocket than what it should. Okay, so I'm going to stop the share on this for right now. I'm going to show you the layout of this property. Okay, so this is the site plan. So this footprint right here is the existing house. Actually, let me get over to, yeah, I guess I don't show it very well. This is the existing house. Then we have, there's a current driveway on the property right here. So we would just maintain that existing entrance. I think it's only dirt, so we would pave this. And then we can do 5 cottages along the back here. What's kind of unique about this property, actually really unique. We haven't had this possibility yet with any development that we've done or any cottage that we've done or analyzed. But we can actually do detached 2-car garages for every cottage. Now, the city of Boise only requires 1 parking space for every cottage. They actually don't require any guest parking spaces. They don't require more than 1, even no matter what the bedroom count is. But we've found in certain neighborhoods, especially this one where this is a pretty busy road and there's no street parking. So we want to have as much interior parking as possible. And so we actually could do 2-car garages for every single home here. Plus we have an additional 5 parking spaces for guests. So ultimately for each house, you have essentially 2.5 spots for parking, which is great for, really any subdivision, but this one in particular, just with not having street parking available, this should be sufficient. And then we have 2 of these houses would face the main road. And then the 5 would be along the back here. And then these 2 would kind of face towards the side yard. And then what's also unique about this property is each of these houses has the room where you can actually have private backyard space. So these ones are set back 15 feet. So they're not a huge yard, but this is actually common with new construction, even on normal subdivisions. The backyard is typically 15 feet. And so these would measure 15 feet deep by about 30 feet wide. These ones would have the smallest yards at only about 6 feet behind them. But it would give them, space to have like a little patio back there. The existing house would keep a decent sized backyard, and then these ones have about 20 feet between the house and the garage. So each one, again, that's pretty unique in these cottage developments. We're building, or we're going through entitlements on one, where basically each house only is set back 5 feet from the perimeter. And then all of the yard space is essentially common yard space in between. So we have a common courtyard in between, and that's basically where all the yard space is common space. So again, this is just unique. in the fact that there's enough room to do enough parking plus enough backyard space, and we don't see that on every deal. And it doesn't really kill every deal either. It's just that this is unique in this area, where this is an ideal situation. The other thing, so this is Cloverdale Road right here. It's a arterial, I think. And it looks like I haven't confirmed this, but so ACHD, the highway district, just took about 20 feet of this frontage. So that tells me they're getting ready to widen this road. So right now it's only 2 lanes. So it's a busy enough road, and it's been getting busier for years with all the new construction out there, that it looks to me like they're preparing to widen this to 4 lanes. And so I think with that, more than likely, now I didn't reduce the cost of like putting in a sidewalk and everything, but more than likely we would actually wouldn't have to put a sidewalk in, and especially not extend the road, because that would all be done by ACHD. But we are, maybe we have to put sidewalk in, but more than likely we wouldn't actually have to extend the road, because it wouldn't make any sense at that point in one segment. And again, even if we did, it wouldn't cost that much, but I think we'll be able to avoid that because it should be on the current planning schedule of ACHD. Okay, you guys that are watching live here, do you have any questions about this? All right.
You've got two different blueprints there with the placement of the garages. Is
Yeah,
it the second that you showed or the first one?
the first one. So so I actually, let me go back to this here. So I use ChatGPT to make like more professional renderings, and it actually kind of screwed up, but it gave me an idea to do this way, because we can actually, so this original one, I had 5 single car garages, and then more, well, about the same amount of guest spaces, but 5 single car garages. But I had this big open space, and by actually turning this, I was actually able to put all 2-car garages for all the units, which I feel like would just be more beneficial on the sales side of it.
What's the width where your cursor is right now? Some of the properties that we toured when we were there last, one of the complaints was that the entry into the parking garage was very narrow, and that was actually a big barrier for people. And so I'm wondering what the width is, because the approach for some of these, like especially that back one, is going to be tricky.
Yeah, so typically on infill, like the requirement is a 22-foot backup space. And so that's what you're probably talking about most of the time when you see garages facing each other, is 22 feet. So it does look narrow. A typical car or SUV may not have an issue with that, but a truck would. I drive like a 24-foot long truck, so I know exactly what that seems like, or that looks like. So yes, that would be like a little bit of a challenge on these garages here. But it's really these 4 out of 9 garages that you'd have the issue with, because these have more backup space, and then these 2 would have more backup space. And this would back up into, I guess if there's cars parked here, you might have an issue, but ultimately it's just between 4 garages that you have that close quarters. So I think, ultimately when somebody's going to look at these to buy these, they're going to be able to kind of, especially the people on the first on the list of looking at them, are going to be able to pick the better parking spaces, I guess, or the better garages. But it's not uncommon. It's really a certain small percentage of people, yes, they're going to, say, look at that and say it doesn't necessarily work, but at least for their vehicle, but most people are going to overlook that.
Okay.
Is it gonna be HOA?
How can you explain again how the plotting works? Like, is there an HOA for this, or are there individual?
Yeah. So it's on a condo plat. So essentially the reason why we can actually shave a year off the development time is because we're not doing a subdivision. And so that's part of it. The other part is that it's just an administrative decision with the city, so it doesn't have to go to city council or planning and zoning commission. So essentially what you're doing is you're building multiple units all in one lot, and then you do a condo plat with it. And then the individual owners, when they buy these, they own the house itself. And then they and then on the HOA documents, we can say, okay, this private yard is reserved for this house, but they don't actually own the land. And then the HOA owns this entire, 1 acre parcel, and then each of these owners owns 1/10 of the HOA.
Oh, so the house is gonna remain in the HOA.
Yeah. Well, the
Oh, I
house
thought it was
itself,
severed. Okay.
it works like a normal condo where the house itself, so like when you buy a condo, you own that condo, you own
Yeah.
the the airspace, I guess, that takes up, but then you don't actually own the land that it sits on.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I thought the house was getting severed though. Are most of your deals the house staying in the condo plat?
So anything that's a cottage village, that's the only way to do it is on a condo plat.
Got it.
So theoretically, we could create a subdivision with this property as well, and do it as a normal subdivision. That just adds a year to the timeline. And then the other thing with that is you typically lose some of the density because you have minimum lot size requirements. So ultimately, this would probably turn into a 7 or 8 lot subdivision instead of 10, because you lose the space because of the roads and everything. So I didn't underwrite it this time as a 7 or 8 unit development because it takes longer and it's typically not as profitable to do it that way.
Okay. And what about financing for people?
Yeah. So with
I
this,
remember there being some type of clause around financing that was a bit tricky.
so we just So on the purchase, so there's an existing house, you can do like a DSCR loan or whatever to purchase that. On the financing on the tail end on cottages, we just have to make sure that the HOA docs are set up and the ownership is set up properly so you can have warrantable. That's the key with cottages and condos is that they're warrantable. If they're not warrantable, it's not the end of the world. It's just that you reduce or you limit some of the buyers. So if they're warrantable, they can get financed through FHA, Franny and Freddie. And so people can buy them with, 3 to 5% down. If they're non-warrantable, they're limited to more conventional products and they're typically going to take 10 to 20% down. So you basically cut off a lot of the buyer pool if they're non-warrantable, because not every, especially with this, where it is a lot of times it's first time home buyers or, people maybe that are downsizing, maybe they don't have a lot of cash. So ideally they're warrantable and you can keep the buyer pool open with a lower down payment.
What's the deciding factor on whether they're warrantable or not?
Yeah, so there's a few things. Number one is the ownership structure. So you typically can't have more or any owner own more than, I think it's 10% of the units. So that's part of it. Part of it is they all have to be for sale. So you can't say, okay, the developer is going to keep half of the units and only sell half of them. So they all have to be for sale. And then the HOA itself has to make sure that you have enough funding in there to and I haven't gotten an official answer on like what that looks like necessarily, but it has to be funded well enough to make sure that the banks are comfortable with it. So there's a Freddie and Fannie checklist that we go through to make sure that that all the HOA docs and the ownership structure is set up properly to make them warrantable. So we actually have one of our lenders that we're planning on working with, both on the construction side, but also they do financing on the tail end for the end buyers. We actually have them currently working on that right now. So
Okay, I've got to jump to another call. Thank you very much. We'll follow up with you.
yeah, sounds good.
Thanks, Zach.
Bye.
Yeah, see ya. Okay, jumping back into this deal. So I want to kind of just reiterate where we're creating value here on the construction side, because that's the point number 3 that I was making earlier, is that on the construction side, you're typically creating value there, more so even than you are on the lot development. Now some deals you can you know, especially I would say greenfield development, which is basically development outside of town. You have a lot of the bigger developers go out and buy 40 acres and they develop it into individual parcels, and then they just sell off the individual parcels. So that's like what most developers will do. And then they're making money on those profits on each lot. And some of our deals you could potentially make money on those individual lots. Um, you know, some of these deals don't look good there. And typically, if they don't look good here, at least where they're minimal risk of loss, they don't typically pencil very well on the other end either. But we're creating on all of these, we're creating more value on the build than we are on the land. And again, it's just it comes down to, yeah, we're creating value on the land, but we're also creating value on the build. And it's really comes down to our process and the scale that we're able to do it at. And so ultimately, then this ends up being a win-win, and it creates value where you're getting amazing returns. So if we go back to the final numbers on this, or the way these numbers work out, so this profit is based on selling 9 units at about a 44,000 profit each, and then taking the $29,000 loss on the existing house, just because of the sales cost there. But your capital invested is only 265,000. And the reason why this is, so you can buy this house, you can leverage this house, put 30% down on it. We underwrite this where you pay the entitlements out of pocket, because there's not a good way to finance that. And then our construction lenders are typically going to come in when the numbers work out well like this, over getting back to this loan to value and loan to cost. They're going to finance, and this, by the way, these costs are factoring in all the construction interest. So when the numbers work out in the lender's favor like that, when they can look at the loan to value and loan to cost and be happy with the way those numbers look, they're going to finance the rest of they're going to finance the horizontal construction and the vertical construction at 100%. And they're typically going to include an interest reserve as well. So again, going back to these numbers, typically our lenders, as long as these numbers look good and you meet their requirements here, and some of them have like a minimum, you know, percentage out of pocket that you pay, but that's actually hit with this deal with this amount, or very close to it. So they're going to fund the construction 100%, and typically have an interest reserve where you're not paying interest out of pocket. So that's just included in the loan. And so, yeah, you're paying a little bit extra interest because you're paying interest on interest, but it's not costing you a lot of money extra out of pocket. So then you look at your cash on cash return at 140%. So this is a 2.4x return. And then the IRR on this, when we did the calculations on when the money comes out of pocket and when it comes back to you, this is closer to 60% IRR. And then we also do this math here too, where like once you sell that original property, so we have it at 18 months, you get 140,000 your cash back. So now really for the next 6 months, you only have a little over 100,000 in the deal. And a lot of times, you know, you're actually getting this back with the first couple sales as well. So those first 3 sales, you're going to get your capital back, actually less than that. Because anyway, you're getting your capital back, plus you're going to start getting profit. So this rest of this profit, you're actually starting to make this before all the units are sold. Okay, so that's the deal this week. And then I want to cover briefly some of the other deals that we have. So this was the deal of the week last week. I should put the date on there. This is another cottage development, and this is more in Boise, close to downtown. It's I guess the west bench theoretically, but it's across the freeway from the central bench. But this one is still on the market. The cool thing with this one, I'll just mention briefly, but you can go back and rewatch it. This has 4 units that are on the property that are currently rented. So you could actually cash flow in the positive after putting, I think I put 30% down here still. So you'd be positive cash flow while you're getting this entitled, and then develop it, and then you make $500,000 on this property with 325,000 out of pocket. So that's another good deal. There's actually a property just 2 doors down. I think it's 2 doors down, maybe 3 from this other one on Cloverdale. This one though, we feel is overpriced. So this is an example of where this house is worth probably a little bit more than 525, but it's, so yeah, I have 660 here, but they're asking basically an extra 340,000 for the land that's attached to it. So it's again, sits on almost an acre. But when you do the math there, so you're paying about 33,000 for raw unentitled land. And then by the time you entitle it, develop it, and if you get it to a sellable lot, you're losing money on each lot. Now we do come over here and we actually make money on the resale on the individual houses. But when we compare it to this, where we get the land for free, you notice there's about a $20,000 difference in value there. And that's where you get the difference in the return here. That and so this one above it here, or the one we were just talking about, has one more unit that we could add as well, because it's a little bit larger lot. So your cost per unit actually go down a little bit. So that kind of helps a little bit, but ultimately our deal this week is a better deal because you're getting the land essentially for free. Okay, and then we have this deal sold at one point and that, or it went pending and then it came back on the market. This is also a really good cottage village. And we actually have another builder that we know that's building another cottage village just a couple lots over from this, and they're actually under construction right now. So this will actually be a really good property, and that model, when they're finished with their cottages and sell those, will have really good comparables. And we still have this deal that's still on the market. And this one would require a rezone, so it's a few more steps, but that's a possibility. And then again, we have another cottage village in West Boise here. And then we still have, I'm trying to remember what this one was. This one on Garden Street. Oh yeah, this is a church that can be converted to apartments. We actually thought we had a buyer for this. He's been kind of slow to pull the trigger, but this is an existing church we can convert to, I think, 19 apartments. And then we can actually build 17 additional cottages as well on the property. So huge opportunity here as well. And then I think when we analyze this deal, essentially you could take your profits from the cottages, get all your cash out of the deal, and ultimately own the church with the apartments for the debt you have on it, and still cash flow. So that's what all these numbers look like. So that this is after, what we expect after all expenses. So you have basically $0 of your own money into it and still cash flow $2,000 a month when you're done with the development. So, that's a huge, I mean, that's like the house hack of the century right there. So, okay. And then I don't think there were any other deals that came on the market this week. We still have multiple deals that are active. Ultimately, we're going to end up at some point in the next, coming months or years. Well, really in the coming weeks, we're going to start advertising. We haven't done any advertising whatsoever aside from just posting on social media and word of mouth. So we've been selling these deals. We haven't been selling every single deal, and our goal is to sell every single deal and have a waiting list. We've just been kind of, smartly scaling and making sure that we're not getting too busy before we can handle it. But at some point, we're going to sell every single one of these deals, and it's going to be one of those things where the first person to jump gets the deal. And because this is such a great system and great returns, we're going to get there, and it's going to really just come down to once we start spending money to advertise it. Okay, so that's all I have for today. So if you got value from today's episode, here's what I want you to do. So don't just subscribe and disappear. Go to the link in the description of this and sign up for our next live Zoom call. So that's also going to get you on our weekly deal of the week email that we send out, where you have first access to the best deal on the market that week. We send you out just a one-page deal sheet, and then you'll have the link to the call. The link to the call is the same every week, so you can register for multiple weeks in advance. And then every Friday, we're looking at new opportunities hitting the market and breaking down the opportunities that we think could create significant value through infill development. So almost every Friday, we have a brand new deal, and it's usually the best deal that we've seen all week. And then you'll also get access to our educational content when you subscribe or sign up for those for our weekly calls. So we send you some of our educational content, and then if you're looking for your next six-figure real estate opportunity, this is really where you want to be, is on this channel and in our weekly calls. So click the link, get on the list. And then if you're watching this on YouTube, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. And then we're going to be releasing these replays every week on Friday at 4 p.m. So I used to just, we used to just update them or upload them as soon as they were finished. We're going to do a 4 p.m. drop every single Friday on our replays, so you know when they're going to hit. And then, if you have maybe you're not not in the position to buy one of these deals, if you have friends or family that you can partner with, or that may be interested in them, share our content, send the deals to them, and figure out a way that we can do these deals together. Anyway, appreciate you listening or jumping in on the call. And until next week, I will talk to you later.